If I was an air molecule, I'm about to have a very interesting life because I'm about to go into the front end of a Concorde jet engine. The irony is, though, that in order to get supersonic thrust out of the back of the engine likes subsonic airflow. It needs a nice, smooth passage of air all the way through it. Unfortunately, if it gets supersonic air going in the front, it has the equivalent of engine indigestion. It's called surge, and it can destroy a jet engine in seconds. To solve this problem, and to get the correct kind of performance out of the engines, the aerodynamicists and the designers came up with what can only be described as a supersonic cat flap. Essentially, when the aeroplane started to go supersonic, then huge quantities of air came in that the engine couldn't cope with, so down comes the cat flap. It was actually called a ramp. So the ramp comes down into the airflow, which slows it down, and as a byproduct, also does some of the engine's work for it, because as the air whacks into the ramp, it's also compressed, which is one of the jobs of the engines in the first place. So they extracted even more efficiency out of an already very efficient engine. Concorde's maiden flight in 1969 was a landmark. After 14 years of planning, France and Britain had built the impossible, a supersonic passenger aircraft. This is one of aviation's sacred sites, the flight deck of a Mach 2.2 Concorde. If I was to make a comparison with rock and roll, I would say that everything on this aeroplane goes to 11, just like the apocryphal amplifier in Spinal Tap. But if you want to see something that really is extraordinary, and you won't find it on any other civilian aeroplane, check out the Mach meter. It goes to Mach 2 and beyond. Interesting fact. As long as Concorde was in service, the RAF never had a single aeroplane that could catch it. In the 1960s, Europe and America were competing to build the jet plane of the future. Britain and France were convinced speed was essential. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Boeing had decided it was time to build the 747. The Boeing 747 was going to be the world's biggest airliner, and in order to build it, they had to build the world's biggest building, this one. And no, that's not a toy truck. The building is massive. You could fit 75 football pitches in here. The 747 project would take 50,000 workers, over 75,000 engineering drawings, and 6 million individual parts. A logistical nightmare. And Boeing planned to get the plane flying in just 3 years. Joe Sutter is the man who made it all happen, the chief designer, the daddy of the 747. He told me just how tough a job it was.
It really was unknown territory. Nobody knew how to build a 350 to 400 passenger airplane. Well, there were a lot of skeptics. My wife, Nancy, she'd meet her friends, and the question was, does your husband know what he's doing? Is he crazy designing that big airplane? The major fight in designing the 747, meet all the requirements, but keep the weight under control. Overweight will kill an airplane. This investment was so big, we were spending Boeing money like it was going out of style. And you get a program like that into trouble, and the recovery is, you know, it's just suicide.
When the 747 rolled out to meet the crowds, no one was prepared for what they saw. They expected big, but this thing was a colossus. It weighed in at nearly 200 tons. That's about the same as 30 buses, and that's without fuel or passengers. The doommongers thought pilots would never manage to control the beast. Would the Jumbo become a billion-dollar white elephant? Boeing test pilot Jack Waddell was the first to discover if Joe Sutter and his team had got their sums right. In February 1969, just 2 months behind schedule, he became the first pilot to lift this Leviathan off the ground. And boy, What a brown trousers moment that must have been. Here at Manston Airport in Kent, I'm going to see how a group of 747 trainees cope with the same challenge today.
We have 28 tons worth of landing gear.
They're going to practice the most difficult part of flying this plane, landing it.
Today when you're flying, you'll have the throttles almost closed and it will be racing along like a wild horse.
I want one.
Hi, Bruce.
Sorry, I'm overdressed. Captain Alan Nicholson is in charge of the training. He's clocked up over 8,000 hours in the 747 and knows exactly what the learner pilots need to look out for.
Gently with the power, otherwise it might take you by surprise. Now you can hear the noise, can't you? 80 knots. Rotate, gentle rotate.
With no passengers on board, we were hurtling. So, John, it's about to be your turn to go and land this. What's the biggest aeroplane that you've flown? What aeroplanes have you flown?
I've been flying the Metroliner, and the Learjet 35 is the most powerful airplane. But
right.
the Learjet weighs about 8,000 kilos. This weighed about, fully loaded, 370 tons.
Right, so it's a wee bit bigger.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you a bit nervous?
Yeah, very.
Because
But I'm excited also. I've been waiting for this my whole, I don't know, life.